coming today for this reenactment of Fresno Sleezo, first performed in the Fresno State University Gallery more than 50 years ago for Judy Chicago and her California Girls, the feminist art program, the first on the West Coast that she started at Fresno State. This was a request by Judy Chicago that I perform a piece that I had done previously, as it says in the brochure, something that I wasn't going to repeat. Generally speaking, my performances were done for specific audiences, for specific events. And thank you so much to John and Heather, John Klaiber and Heather Schlesinger, for coming and taking time out of their busy schedule to do this performance, and my good friend Shirley Ballinger, who I knew from high school theater performances. And we are in costume as well, of course. Obviously, this is taken from a famous painting by Edward Hopper, actually, our uniforms. And these, of course, inspired by the actual actions of the participants. This piece is a little different than the original because it adds the element of organization and process art that you were able to experience Heather processing in front of you. So that is an additional element. And one of the reasons why it was added was to deal with the philosophy of making art and also doing performance. Always I wanted a blur between the beginning and the end, and that's why the seating was important and why we added the usherettes. And of course, we did as much period stuff as we could. Heather's costume is taken from a photograph of an old hippo trainer, actually from the circus. And John's, we just went through a variety of things. We're trying to give it a flair of something from another place and another time in both instances. And hopefully we took you into another space today with this performance. And thank you again to everyone who participated and who attended. And I'll take questions if you have any, and if you have any of Heather and John as well. Go ahead.
So this was your original idea and performance?
Yes.
What was your creative process in?
Okay, so the creative process, at the time I had an art partner, Stephen Bame, and he played the Carney. And I have always been fascinated from the time I was very small, for some strange reason, with carnivals and circuses. It wasn't like my parents were taking me to them, but I was just very interested in that. In first grade, we had to do a full-size drawing of ourselves, whole body. And mine was of a trapeze artist. That was how I portrayed myself at 7. So, you know, I don't know where that came from. But I also, when I moved to Fresno, I had a favorite store. It was called The Big Party. And it was down by the railroad tracks, a ramshackle place. You could buy Christmas ornaments and decorations all year round. It was a big fire trap. But the man who ran it, I pegged as a carnival person, and probably wasn't, but you know, that was, so when I was doing this, first of all, the original performance, Student in Chains, had, you know, not a lot of clothing and some chains. So that was kind of the takeoff point. And then, you know, everything else fell into place from that. The lunch trays, and by the way, these lunch trays are vintage. We used a lunch tray around my neck, and, you know, Steve was shooting the rubber tip darts at me. We didn't have all this other creation stuff first. That is an additional element, and part of it had to do with making it really clear that Heather was in charge here today, so that you could appreciate that element of women making decisions. Usually when you have the knife throwing, or whatever it is, the subordinate person, it's a woman or even a child. There's one online you can see of what looks like a mother in 50s dress throwing knives at a child who's wiggling around. I mean, it's shocking. But that's usually the way it works. But I wanted in this piece for you to know that she's in charge of this. So that was an important part of this performance. Yeah, go ahead.
If I have it correct, you stated that this wasn't going to be performed again?
This was a piece that was performed once.
And you said earlier that you weren't going to perform it again?
No, I didn't say that. I said this is a reenactment of that piece. I did not perform this again.
Gotcha.
somebody else performed.
I just wanted to.
So it's a different performance at this point, and it's a different audience for a different purpose. And I think that's part of what I'm trying to say here, is that generally speaking, I did repeat performances.
Well, what was the purpose of the first one?
The purpose of the first one was a protest piece. I didn't really understand it was a performance. It was an installation, and I was part of the installation. I was protesting graduate exhibition policies at UCLA. Powering the people. That's why I was in chains in the White Room. You know, I was making myself part of the installation. You know, we could not attend our critiques.
But what I meant was when you did this one, Fresno Sleezo.
When I did Fresno Sleezo, Judy wanted me to repeat Student in Chains, and I wasn't about to do it. This was the beginning of doing pieces just for specific situations. Not that the Student in Chains wasn't, but the next one was just for Judy and, you know, the California girls. That was the audience.
Well, was the role that Heather played, it was your role originally.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel as if you were in the same sort of position as when you were stretched out?
No, not at all. Not at all. The whole idea was to do something completely different. Now, Judy interpreted that as male on female violence.
Yeah.
But there was kind of a reason why, maybe, but mostly mindset perhaps. You know, she came into it, you know, wanting the Student in Chains, and I did something else that she liked even better, or maybe as much. But what happened was I was so in the zone, and I was maybe a little hypoglycemic that day, that I just was out. I was out. So every time that dart would hit the lunch tray, I would kind of flinch, you know, inadvertently. And Judy took that as really, you know. But that was the mindset she had at the time. And you remember, this was 1970. This was October, early November of 1970. This is how feminists were interpreting things. And it was the way the art was intended. I never intended that. It was a spoof. So it was important to bring you that sense of humor today. And hopefully we did that. Hopefully you didn't think, oh my gosh, he's doing something horrible. You go ahead.
I was really interested in all the different costumes. If you could elaborate on like the process for thinking of the costumes.
For making these costumes? Okay, so Heather's costume, Heather did not want to repeat what I wore. It was kind of indecent, I've been told, or too risque. And she has, you have to understand, my body type in Fresno, well, you can look at the picture. You know, you can't tell whether that's a male or female body, basically. And I did not have any kind of real, kind of, okay, like I'm ashamed of my body. I didn't have that process. But for Heather, I wanted to find something from a vintage circus costume, and we did find one. And it's very similar to this. It's not exactly the same, it's very similar. If you look online enough, you'll find a woman with dark hair and pigtails and bows and little boots and little shorts, and she's wearing a top that's covered with some kind of jewels, and she's got the cuffs, although they're the same color, and she has a hippopotamus with her. And we both loved that image, and so I was striving to make that. And in terms of my costume and Shirley Ballinger's costume, this is taken from Edward Hopper's 1939 New York Theater, of the usherette standing against the wall holding her flashlight. A very famous painting. So we did our best to reproduce that. And as for the workmen's costumes, I thought originally of painters' whites. And then John and everyone agreed that the bib overalls would be better. And of course, I love bib overalls. I wore them myself when I was building my house. So it was kind of an obvious thing. I think that we had a lot of good fortune with internet access to costumes in this case. Something we wouldn't have had in 1970, of course. I had to make everything. Go ahead.
So would you feel that the message then and now is still the same?
Well, the message is never the same. And one of the really important things for me with performance is the whole dynamic from beginning to after. And so, of course, John and and Heather have their own process that they've been going through, because that is a journey. It's the journey of making art and then recovering from the process of presenting your art and making your art. So it's not something that happens in one frame. It's something that, you know, is this process over time that is a very intense process and can be very poetic or very emotional or very, I don't know. I mean, it's an atmospheric thing that happens in your life as you get the idea, conceive the work, sort through what you can make it out of. That's what this whole sorting process is. And then you produce it, and then you recover from it.
And I would just like to add that it's very interesting that you're saying that Heather is in control, because if you view it in a dom-sub relationship, it's always the sub who's in control in that dynamic. So I really like that.
Oh,
You
good.
also-
Good. It was important for me to have, for her to have that image of, okay, she's making these decisions and driving this. Yeah.
You said that the items represented like organization and the processing of the making the art. I was just wondering if the drapery in the background had any special significance, or is that just an extension of it?
Well, we could have had a lot of different draperies here for her to choose from, and we didn't, but she's still making a choice to ornament the wall. And of course, I was at the fabric store and I made the choice to buy the fabric. And you know, it's just like the process. The gorilla is my costume, and I made it because I rented a gorilla costume, and I was very disappointed with that process. This is why I would rather make or buy costumes. And when I got to the fabric store, the most appealing fabric was that fabric. So you are always interacting with material as a sculptor, as a performer, as a costume maker. You know, it's the material that drives everything, and your interaction with the material. So yeah, I mean, I think that artists are material freaks. You know, they love materials, they interact with materials. The materials can change what you choose to do and how you choose to do it, because you're interested in that material or the result that it's going to look like. Like when I went to the fabric store, I had to be conscious of, I'm trying to imitate a painting, you know, and work with what they've got. Because there aren't a lot of venues for buying fabric anymore. Not that you can go look at.
You have a question over here?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Are your tattoos real?
Yes. No, that's a great segue into.
Yeah, please talk about that.
Yeah, Sloan Cabrera. She's the artist that did all these tattoos, and yeah, I don't have any tattoos, but after today, I'm kind of like, oh, I need to maybe just suit it up. Got the and this one. There's this.
Does it go all over your back?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
No, it doesn't. We did all this today. What time did we start today? 7 or so. Yeah.
45.
Yeah. So.
No, very early.
Yeah, she busted out all this stuff in just a couple hours, so
Wow.
it was a fun experience, I think. I
Does
love.
it go on your eyes too?
Well, we did a little extra stuff as well.
That's just a little makeup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This part is after. Sloan didn't do this part, but like the tattoo on the back of the head and on the arms, and yeah, so pretty cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
If they're fake, what's the point of the tattoos?
Well, the point of the tattoos, of course nowadays, you know, it's different because everyone has tattoos. But there was a time when if you saw someone with tattoos, it meant they either were a carny or had been in prison or both. You know, and so I came up with a term called carny-con, you know, but nowadays everybody has tattoos, so it's a totally different meaning. But you know, we are kind of placing this in the past tense relationship. You know, we're trying to evoke something of the past with the costumes and all the rest of it. So maybe the tattoos are a little bit different. And we tried to make them old school, among other things, and that's why you have the cobra on the head. And plus, he's turned around. He was supposed to take his hat off, by the way, but you're looking at the back of his head all the time. So having a cobra looking at you was really kind of something that was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cobra looking at you. He didn't take take the hat off. The hat was too cool, too carny for me to say, don't wear it, but he was supposed to take it off once he sat down. But you know, when you're into these things, what happens, happens. You have to be capable of just kind of going with the flow. Yeah,
I'll
go
just
ahead.
stand like this for the rest of the season. So the art.
You just said what happens, happens. I think it was really great how when you stood up and you actually did take the hat off, oh, you're Sleezo. Like you're walking away and you finally see you're Sleezo, like you had Sleezo. I thought it was part of the performance, so it was really powerful to be like, oh, okay, she's not Sleezo. He's Sleezo.
Well, that was something that was so interesting about both Heather and John. They kept saying, well, am I Sleezo? Am I Sleezo? And I'm thinking, it's just a title. But I could see where you're coming from, that, okay, now we know who is Sleezo. Anyone else? Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks for agreeing to reenact this piece. And I was just wondering what you're working on these days.
Well, you know, I at 77, you know, I'm not doing an awful lot of art because I already have a lot of stuff of my own to process and get rid of. Something that I do, though, now and then, I teach a class called Goddess, Witch, Feminist, and I make museum reproductions that I take to my students to handle and look at and contemplate, you know. So I've made the Willendorf many times, and, you know, this is one of my interests now, because I'm still interested in three-dimensional stuff. You know, and I haven't been doing a lot of sewing. I have, of course. I still apparently can do it, however. And of course, this is why it was so great to have Shirley involved, because she's a seamstress from way back. And, you know, having someone do the thing that can also do the other thing is important when you're already doing too many things yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
So it was supposed to be funny,
Yeah.
where the original audience was laughing.
No, the original audience was not laughing.
And nobody here was laughing either.
Well, this audience was taking very seriously that in a performance, particularly a silent performance like this, you are trying to awaken the other senses and take it in. And, you know, because everything becomes so much more significant. If it had noise, and other than the drill and things like that, then it's a play. If you have words and all of the rest of it, it's a skit or it's a play. And I had a background in theater, and I never wanted the performances to be theater, because we can do theater. I even wrote a play, amazingly enough, once, eventually. But it was an Amazon play, by the way. Amazon's very important in the whole scheme of things. So, at any rate, that's why it's nonverbal. And thank you so much for participating in the envelope of silence, for the support of the performers and the whole energy of the performance. It really does contribute to the level of psychic energy that the performers can raise.
I respect your ability to protest the university at which you were a grad student during your original performance, and I'm curious to know, because we have two former students here, did John and Heather also feel like you were protesting anything about your experience at Sac State?
Aw.
I didn't feel like that.
Yeah, I think I did that while I was a student at Sac State pretty good. I don't know if I was really protesting. Honestly, I feel like this was, for me, is a big opportunity to follow someone else's lead, you know, and it was interesting to, rather than like always going my own way and doing whatever I want to do, like following someone who has a vision that's completely different, and it kind of opened my mind to a lot of things, so it was fun. I had a good time with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I was just really trying to support what Vicki wanted.
How fun is that?
Inherently, though, in knowing that there was that kind of especially with graduate school conflict, I did think that was cool, and like, you know, having, however you're gonna do that stuff, you know, it was interesting experience.
But there's also a dynamic between a man and a woman and friends as well, in your personal lives, and that must have created some sort of unique situation for you that wasn't performed. I mean, it was just Was there any of that you felt?
Yeah, there's definitely a certain level of comfortability because we do know each other. I think a lot of feeding off of each other was natural.
And we've done performances before.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many things we've done, but we've worked with each other a lot. We were actually undergrads when Elaine and everybody. Great job, Elaine, with this show. This is an awesome show. Thank you for having us do all this. You asked us to do this, what?
When we were students.
2018?
2019.
2019?
I'm really grateful to you for doing it years later.
Yeah, we made this deal before the pandemic, you know?
That's right. That's absolutely right.
It was a whole different world then, so, you know. It was good to see it all come to fruition after all that time, I think.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Could you speak to how it may have felt for you being a viewer of your own performance?
Well, I'm not a viewer of my own performance. First of all, I am involved and I am playing a role. Second of all, I am the director and the producer. So it's not like sitting where you're sitting. You know, it is completely different because one of the things that we want for you to have is the element of surprise and delight, which of course you have because you are unfamiliar with what's going to happen. And of course I don't have that, I can't produce that. But as someone who is working to make something happen and then sees it come to fruition, as John said, this is always gratifying, always very gratifying. And of course the wonderful thing about this situation today is that photographs are being taken, filming is being done. This did not happen with the original Fresno Sleezo. We had one photograph that was taken after the performance. And I think that it was my partner, Douglas Gentry, who took that photograph. And that was all the photograph we have. So, you know, we're lucky that we had even one photograph. A lot of these pieces did not get photographed properly because if we were all doing the performance, there was nobody left to photograph it. So we get some before pictures and some after pictures. And you can look through my book if you like. Most of the performances are described in there. Yeah.
I was just wondering, since you mentioned that he was supposed to take off his hat during the performance, did anything else happen that you didn't have planned or went
Always something goes a little bit differently, but I think that all the improv was really wonderful because John did end up making up the whole other lunch tray and actually putting it on Heather and then taking it off, and he had to remake it. I think we didn't plan that, but that was a wonderful touch. So, you know, when you're playing with these materials and ideas, things can work out better, you know, when you're kind of, okay, I'm too excited to do it in the order that we originally planned, but I'm going to do something different, and it turns out actually better, more interesting. Yeah, in the back.
So as a producer for these performances, do you have a preference for whether or not you're an active performer?
Well, you see, I do so few of them. I did so few of them years ago, but years ago, of course, I would have been in them because when you are performing, you have more control, you know, because you know what you want. But you don't necessarily project what you expect to. So you, like I say, you have to at some point give up control. Yeah, go ahead.
In Professor Lane's art contemporary class, we're actually learning about conceptualism right now. Is this considered conceptualism art because you have an idea that was brought?
Well, all art is conceptual, okay, but performance actually is an event, and conceptual art does not necessarily involve producing an event or an experience for a group of people. It can be quite a bit different than that. So, but all art has a concept and carries forth that concept. So in that respect, it's all conceptual. I think that some performance art is much more conceptual than this is. Performance art has a big range. And you know, if it's staged or reenacted, the reenactment will be different each time because of who's doing it, but also who the audience is. A lot of performances have a lot of fluidity in terms of audience participation, and that changes everything. Everyone's familiar with Yoko Ono's cut piece? So, you know, there you go. That's been restaged many times. But because an audience can come in knowing they can cut clothes off of somebody, off of a woman, that can have a lot of consequences. And here we're talking about the whole structure and relationships between the performer, the audience, and the whole act. And you can see that it could be a situation that could easily get out of control. And that was a worry, that was a concern. A lot of feminists thought that cut piece was not a feminist piece. I think it's an excellent piece to demonstrate how an artist is cut up and cut to ribbons by the critiques of everyone who attends or everyone who reviews. I thought it was brilliant in that regard. And I thought that Yoko Ono in the original piece managed to exert a certain amount of control over her audience, which would have been important every time it was restaged too. I mean, you can't have a riot and have it be a performance. Okay, well, thank you again for coming. It was wonderful to see you out here today on such a beautiful day coming inside. And please enjoy the rest of this exhibition, which goes on for quite a bit longer.
April 13th.
April 13th. So we've got a lot of time to study these works of art and to read my book. There you go. You have an assignment.
Thank you.